There we go. It's recording in case you miss any part of it, and I'll post it as soon as it's finished doing its thing. And all right. Everybody ready for chapter 4? Piece of cake.
We're ready. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening. All right. And we got a message from Anthony. He's going to listen in. All right. No problem. And let me get my pen here. I need that tonight. All right. We're going to give everybody just another minute or two. But I think we have everybody. I think. And Robert says, I picked up the Baofeng 8-watt radio and the Nagoya NA771 antenna to put on top. I programmed 146 into it with a PL of 146 and negative shift. When I press the button, I am not getting a chirp in response. What may I have done wrong? So when you press transmit, you're at 146.850.
Correct.
It should go down to what? I forget.
846.250.
That's right. And does it do that?
Yes.
And you don't get a chirp.
Negative.
I don't know. We'll have to take a look at that and see what's wrong here. And you put that in the CTCSS, right? Transmit?
Correct. Menu 11, menu 13, menu 25, and menu 26.
Okay. Well, oh, no, you don't need it. You only need it in the transmit.
So I don't need menu 11?
I don't know what menu 11 is.
Menu 11 says set receive tone.
No, negative.
So what do I put, what do I do? Turn that off?
0, yeah, off. You only need it in the transmit tone. CTCSS only in transmit.
I'm going to turn it off and try it.
All right, don't be afraid. And let me get my, while you're trying that, I'm going to hook up my webcam here, because you're going to need that to see that too.
Still no chirp.
Still no chirp. All right, so just check that that 136.5 is not anyplace else.
Okay.
And let me just check. I'm going to turn on my radio, and we'll see. Just make sure Limarc is up. Believe me, if Limarc wasn't up, I would have known it by now. I had 75 people talking to me. Hold on, let me try it. So it's working for me. So it's up. Now you're doing this. What town are you in?
Massapequa Park.
Oh, then you should make it no problem. Well, maybe not. Did you try it outside?
Well, that was my next. I stuck my hand out the window, but I didn't do it outside.
And try doing it outside.
You want me to go stand in the front lawn, and I'll come back in a second?
All right, I'll be here.
I'll be right back.
All right. All right, let's get this guy going here. Close this guy, and we'll see if that works. All right, cool. And everybody should see my moving on the mouse, and we can see the calculator, right? You can see the calculator. No problem, right? Everybody's good? We see it?
All
right, cool. So we'll put that aside for right now because we don't need it this very second. And we'll be cool. We'll just give Robert a minute. Something. See if he could reach the our repeater. And Okay. Well, we'll give Robert another minute. Make sure he's okay. All right. Any questions on any of the stuff we covered last class? Last call. All right. I'm going to assume you know it all here, and you're all good to go. So we're going to start with Chapter 4. I don't want anybody to kind of freak out here. I want you to go nice and easy and relax. And we start off Chapter 4 with exactly the same paragraphs that we discovered. Any luck, Robert? Robert, any luck? No, maybe Robert isn't back yet. So we start off Chapter 4 with exactly the same definitions that we discussed in the technical. Okay? So amperes we're going to discuss as A, voltage is E, it comes from the French, volts are V, and power is P, and it's measured in watts, and the product of voltage and current is that old circle that we remembered from last time, P equals E times I, and we talk about it here. So these two guys you're familiar with already because you used them, okay? But the question becomes, what happens if you have P and I, but you need to solve for resistance, okay? That could be a problem, all right? So what they want you to learn is these two formulas here, okay? So these are the two new formulas. And the reason that we go through this is, as generals, you are going to have access to more power legally, and you're going to have access to higher performance equipment. So we just want you not to hurt yourself or somebody else. So that's the reason, that's the rationale behind all of this, okay? So these formulas are pretty self-explanatory, and you can go through these questions here, okay, to get a hang of it. Is there any question on any of these? So these are just derivative formulas from basic Ohm's law, right?
So why are we showing squared?
Okay, because if you take the derivative of this, remember that we're solving in this power formula, we don't have anything for resistance. So in order to compute power, and then when there's a resistance issue, this is the new formula, okay? Or if you're solving for power, you can use this formula as well. That's the reason. Because these two charts, okay, do not allow for computing of resistance for power, for example, okay? So that's why you need to know two more. And that's all you need to know. There's no more after this, okay? So that's the reason you do that. So you guys can go through this. It's actually pretty simple, okay? You shouldn't have a problem. We'll go over them again and when to use them, okay? And the questions follow this pattern. They give you the voltage, DC, and they give you the resistance. And the only way to compute that is to use one of these two formulas, okay? Same type of question here. So it's important you understand the type of question and when to use that, okay? Remember, a light bulb is the same thing as a resistor, right? Okay. And you do one for resistance and one for amperage, all right? Not too bad. All right, cool. Then we talked about the wavelength, and we covered this actually in our technicians class. And I told you that the formula for, let's see if this works. Okay, it does for a change. So over on the left-hand side, I told you that wavelength is equal to the speed of light, okay, over the wavelength. So an easy way to remember that is 300, okay, over the frequency in megahertz. And you can find that out. And using this same formula, you can determine the wavelength of anything, okay? So that's pretty simple, too, all right? There are no questions on the exam regarding this, But if you need to figure out this stuff, that's the way you would do it. So it's this guy here. Well, I can't draw on there. Okay, cool. All right. And I'm going to go slow on purpose just in case anybody has a question. All right? Everybody understands the difference between a series circuit and a parallel circuit, or do you need me to go over that again? Are we good? Okay. All right. Now, we talked about dB, okay? And what we did here is I gave you the most common one, okay? So remember that when you're computing dB, you need to have a reference power. So a reference power, for example, is the power that's stated for your radio in your manual. So we're going to take this formula here first, okay? So this is a dB for power, this bottom one here. I can't change pens here at the moment. So dB equals 10 times log 10 of the reference power over the measured power. So what you do is you always do the math first. You always do the arithmetic first. So what I'm going over this guy here, okay? So what I'm suggesting to you is on all of these formulas, always do this portion first, and then worry about the left side of the formula later, right? So for example, let's take a what if, and let's pick on Karen. Hey Karen, you with me?
I'm here.
Hiya Karen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So we say that our Baofeng, according to the manual, puts out 8 watts, right? But Karen, we get up on the roof of our car and we measure it with a watt meter, and our antenna is putting out how much power? Make up a number.
10.
10. Okay. So how would we compute in dB what this is, right? So what we would, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Take 10 divided by 8.
Wait a minute, 10 divided by 8, and that gives me 125, right?
Yes.
125, okay. And then what am I going to do after that?
And then you're going to multiply that times log 10, or you're going to just do log 10.
Right, so we're going to hit the log button, okay? And I get 0.09, and then
you're,
yeah.
And then multiply that by 10.
All right, and then you multiply it by 10, because that's the formula, okay? And I get 9 dB. And, no, I get 0.9 dB. I'm sorry, 0.9 dB. So I multiply it by 10, so I move this guy over. So I had a 0.9 dB gain over what the manual said, okay? And that's for power. This is a power formula. So it's 10 times log 10 of reference power over measured power, okay? They do it the other way. They say powered measured versus power reference. That's easy. If we wanted to do the same thing for voltage, okay, it's 20 times this guy here, okay? So it's a slightly different formula. Thank you, Karen. So it's a slightly different formula. Hold on. And I got to switch to my non-drawing mode. So when we're looking, we're going to do voltage to get dB measurement in voltage, okay, we use this formula. So it's 20 times. So remember, for power, it's 10 times. For voltage, it's 20 times. Same formula, you just multiply differently, okay? All right, and then they give you some examples here, and I'd like you to all just take a second and make sure that you get this answer. Everybody knows how to get this answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the math first. So we do 25 divided by 5 equals, and I get 5. I hit the log button, and I get 0.69. I multiply that times 10, and I get 6.989700043. Close enough to 7. Did everybody get that answer?
Yes.
Okay. Any problems with that? Pretty simple, right?
Yep.
And then when we're going to do voltage, we're going to do this formula. So we're going to try this one together, right? Same deal. We do the math first. So I have 0.1 divided by 2 equals, and I get 0.005. I hit the log button up in the top, all right? And I get 1.3, right? And I multiply that times 20, and I end up with 26, minus 26, I'm sorry. Okay? Everybody get that one?
Yes.
Okay. Pretty simple. No problem, okay? Now they kind of throw you for a curve here, and they say, we want you to know how to calculate power voltage from a dB. So the power ratio is equal to the log minus 1 of the dB over 10. Wow, that sounds complicated, but it's not, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new button to your calculator here, okay? And a lot of people panic about this, but it's no problem, okay? So on the calculator, the minus 1 function, you have to hit the second button and then hit our friend the log button. That's the way you compute. And if you look on the top there, it says 10x, and it's in little yellow. So what that little yellow means is you have to hit the second button first to compute that. So we would hit the second button, and then would hit the log button. So to use this example, and I'm going to shrink this a little bit so I can read the example. Okay. They say, okay. For example, voltage ratio is 32 dB equals the log of minus 1, 32 over 20, okay? And because they give you that as an example. A power ratio, 9 dB, all right. A voltage ratio of 32 dB, 32 over 20, and you're going to hit the minus, so you do the math first, right? So you do 32, and you're going to divide that by 20. Oh, I got to turn it on first. 32, and I'm going to hit the divide button by 20, right? And then I'm going to hit the second log button, right? So I get this. I get 16 second log, right? And I end up with 39.8. And 39.8 is approximately 40. Okay? Close enough. So that's the way that works. Okay? So, pretty simple. Just use that second log button and you'll have no problem. Okay?
Well, Joe, where did the 32 and the 20 come from?
They gave it to you in the example.
Did I miss that, I guess? Okay.
Did we lose Joe?
Yeah, I think we lost somebody.
Oh, okay. Richard, you with me?
Yes, I am.
All right, Richard, I have a question, okay? So you and I take a trip. Where did you always want to go here in the U.S.? Pick a city. Any place you'd like to go.
Pick a city. Let's see. All right, let's go to San Francisco.
San Francisco, okay? Cool. And then, and where are you located?
In New York City.
New York City. Wow, that's a trip, man. Okay, that's 2,972 miles, by the way. All right, anyway, so you and I get into the car, right? And we got this new supercar that you only have to fill up the tank once, right? So you start driving, and you really want to get there, so you do 65 miles an hour, right? And then you get tired after about 24 hours, and I take over, and I drive like an old lady, so I'm going to drive at 55 miles an hour, right? And Joyce, you with us, Joyce? So Joyce wants to drive. Maybe she doesn't want to drive. Joyce, how fast do you want to go? Joyce is texting me, I think. Wow. Joyce wants to do 70. So my question is, what was our average speed? How would I compute that?
You'd have to know how many hours each person drives.
Well, assuming we let's say we did it for 1 hour, just to make the math simple. Okay, we're driving for 1 hour towards San Francisco. What's our average speed? How would I compute that?
You'd add up the 3 totals.
Right. So I get 0 here, carry to 1. Right. So I have 11, 12, 18. Right. And then what do I do?
No, 190.
190. Okay, 190.
And then you would divide it by the 3 of us.
Right, exactly correct. So I divide it by the 3 of us, and I'm not good at arithmetic.
We're doing 63 and a third.
63 and a third. Okay, thank you for that. 63 and a third. Okay? What does this number mean? Is that really an average? The answer is no. Okay, that's not really a meaningful average. All that this number means down here is that at some point in our trip, we went 63.3 miles an hour. That's all this means. So when we refer to this to be an average, it's not really a meaningful average. Okay? So if I would have gone faster, or you would have gone slower, or Joyce would have gone really fast, we could have had the same average speed, but again, all that means is one of us hit this speed at one time, just once. That's all it means. So you can't say that we stayed at this speed for any length of time. You can't say that we stayed on it for 25 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes. That's not possible for us to say that. So it's important to know that what we refer to as an average just means that we hit that value at some point in time. Okay? All right, cool. And if you don't believe me, take my word for it, okay? And the reason you need to know about that is there is a very meaningful value, okay? And that value is known as root mean squared, okay? So there's a more accurate way of measuring that, okay? And that's called root mean squared. That's this guy here, RMS, okay? So when we rate power, okay, we can talk about power in different ways. And remember that power is, and we're talking about a sine wave here, just for argument's sake, okay? So power, we're measuring on this sine wave. I drew that almost halfway decent. We can measure power different ways, okay? We can measure power inside this envelope, okay? We can measure power at the peak, okay? But we're in average power, but real average power, okay? And the average power could be down here that we're averaging, okay? Or it could be a little bit different. And that's what this chart, this confusing chart that they give you, really means. And what it means is, and I'm switching pens, I'm stalling while I'm switching pens here. Okay, so what this really means is, okay, is a different way of measuring the average. This is important to us as amateur radio operators for a variety of reasons. We want to know what we're putting out, root mean squared, which is the most meaningful, and we want to know how that compares to average and to peak. So the peak would be here, okay, peak envelope power, okay, or peak to peak power. This is maximum, okay, and what our RMS, root mean squared power output is. That's this stuff here, okay. Why? Because when we want to measure peak power, and stereo people, manufacturers of stereo equipment, love to do this. I mean, they live for this, right? So they'll sell you a stereo system. Alpine is big on that, okay, Alpine Stereos. And they'll sell you a 1,500 watt stereo system for your car for a ridiculous amount of money. But they're rating it at peak-to-peak power, okay? So they rate it here. And that power does exist, but it only exists in a scientific laboratory if the temperature is exactly 70 degrees on a sunny day where the moon, the sun, and Mars are in total alignment, okay? That's when that occurs. More meaningful than that, and I think for people who are into stereos or any kind of power amplification, know that what really kind of matters more importantly is its output RMS, root mean squared, okay? And they give you some formulas here. And that's important. Why is RMS so important? Because it's really a more accurate representation of the average, and we want you to worry about exposure, okay? Not for me, because I'm a QRP guy, but one of us in this group, and yes, I say one of us, will undoubtedly go out and buy an amp at some point and be cranking out 1,500 watts at least to talk to their family on Jupiter, okay? So we want to be careful about exposure and the effect that that has to our neighbors, our surrounding area, ourselves, our family, that kind of stuff. So what we do, okay, when we want to compute RMS power, which I suggest you do, is we multiply by 0.707 times the peak.
Did we lose Joe?
I think we did.
Yep.
He's playing peekaboo.
Hey, this is David. Anybody copy?
David from Wyoming copies.
I can hear you, David.
Thank you. I had to turn off. Go to meeting and turn it back on. Nobody was reading me.
I think we've all lost Joe, though.
Yeah, but I'm back, right? You hear me now?
Cool, man. Joe's back.
All right. I had the same problem. Only I get to turn my microphone off and turn it back on, and it works for a little while. So sorry about that. Anyway, I will never use GoToMeeting again. This is the last time. After that, I'm going to use somebody else. This is awesome.
They really screwed it up, man.
Yeah, they really messed it up.
There's
Anyway.
a patch out, though, Joe.
There's a what, sir?
There's a patch out for it.
What were they going to tell me?
I had to go looking for it. It's on their website.
Oh, my goodness. I'll thank you for that heads up. I'll look for it, and we'll see if that makes a difference. Anyway, so we're trying to compute RMS, and we can measure it a bunch of different ways. So depending on what we're measuring it from. So if we were measuring it from this point, and we wanted to see what the RMS value was going to be, we do 0.707. So to figure out RMS, on this value, this peak power here that they're claiming, I would multiply by 0.707. And this is a mathematical formula that gives you the average, okay, of RMS. So it's an average of an average, okay? All right. The other way to measure RMS, peak to peak, so from this distance to this distance, so these two guys, okay, you would take peak 1 minus peak 2, and this is even more accurate because this doesn't always happen exactly this way. So this line that occurs here doesn't always, they're not exactly the same always. So for a more precise measurement, you would take the peak-to-peak voltage and you will multiply it by 0.707 divided by 2. And we're going to do some examples of this, okay? So when you're measuring peak-to-peak voltage, you use this formula, okay? I don't want you to get too crazy about this stuff. It's actually pretty simple, okay? But I just want you to know that the formula exists this way, all right? All right, so for example, it says here, A sine wave with a peak voltage of 17 volts has an RMS value of 0.0707 times 17. So when we're figuring out simple, and it's simple because we're just figuring out peak voltage, simple peak voltage, we take the voltage that they gave us and we multiply it by 0.707, and that equals 12 volts. Okay? So this is important for you to know because this question will probably be on your test. Okay? The other one, there's 3 exams with that question, okay, and 3 exams with this question. Okay? And this one's a little bit trickier because it says a sine wave with a peak-to-peak voltage of 100 volts. And what's the difference? The difference is here they're asking you for peak, and here they're asking you for a peak-to-peak voltage. All right? So when you want to figure out a peak-to-peak, right, and they give it to you as 100, we need to figure out what the average is of that. Why we divide it by 2, right? Peak to peak, there are 2 peaks, right? Upper and lower. And we divide it by 2. So RMS, 0.707, we know that. Whenever you want to convert to 0.707 to RMS, it's 0.707. And here, since it's peak to peak, we take the 100 volts and we divide by 2. Why? Because we need to get the average of that. Okay? And if you compute that, this is simple. It's 50, right? 100 divided by 2, 50. You multiply it 0.707, you'll get 35.4 volts. Okay? Any problem with that? Okay. Yes?
Well, Joe,
Good. Yes.
go down to the next on the page 4-5.
Okay.
P-P has a different formula, 1.414.
Right.
I don't understand that.
Okay, and the reason for that is because you're measuring the peak. This is more closely associated to peak envelope power. So here, everything is doubled. So a sine wave with an RMS voltage. So you're going backwards, right? So we're not computing for RMS. So we're not trying to RMS. We're trying to find out what, we already have that information. That's the difference here. So here, in this example, they tell you that the RMS voltage has 120 volts peak to peak. So we're figuring out the formula backwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to compute peak to peak, you would use 2 times 1.414 times 120, because this is the value that they gave you, okay? And that comes out to be 339.4 volts after you do the exam, after you do the math, rather.
Where does the 1.414 come from?
Okay, it comes from up here. Okay, when you know the RMS value, okay, you use this formula. So it gets a little tricky, but you can do this. Okay, so just to recoup. When you're talking about a sine wave and they talk about a simple peak, not peak to peak, simple peak, you use this formula. Okay? And we're looking for, what we're trying to compute is voltage RMS. Okay? When you're still trying to figure out what RMS is, okay, and they tell you peak to peak voltage, you use this formula. You take the average. Peak to peak means average. You need to figure out the average. You always divide by 2, and you multiply it by our friend 0.707. Okay? When they give you the RMS voltage, so we're computing it the other way, you use this formula, okay, which is this guy here. So we know what RMS is, all right? They told us it was 100, I think, right? 100? Yeah, 120. So they told us 120. We'd use this formula here. So this is for when you don't know what the peak is, but you do know what RMS is. Okay? Yes? Did that make sense?
I got it. I got it.
All right, good. All right, cool. And then you can go through all of this stuff, and that's always fun, okay? Now, these guys underneath here, I do not want you to stress over too much. They take it too far to an extreme here, okay? So don't worry about these too much. They will be on your practice exams. They will not appear on your final exams, with the exception of this guy here, okay? All right, that may appear on one exam, all right? But I haven't seen it lately, so, you know, that's the only one you need to know. I don't want you to clog up your brain with all of the stuff too much, because it's not so important, okay? So take a break from that from right now. We will revisit it, okay? I just want to introduce the topic to you guys, and I'm trying not to get you to freak out. So remember, simple peak, you have simple peak value, you use 0.707. Peak to peak, right? You use this guy, 1414 divided by the peak divided by 2. That gives you the average, right? And then if you have the RMS and you need to figure out what the peak to peak is, you use this formula. Okay? Just make a note of that, either in the handouts that I gave you, or put a little sticky note or write in your manual. All right? And remember that RMS is this value here. And it's important that you notice that the RMS value is actually higher than the average value. This is, if we were doing simple figuring out average like we did on our trip, that's what this looked like. So the RMS is actually a little bit higher than the straight mathematical, arithmetic average. Okay? Don't freak out about this page. We'll get back to it, I promise. Okay, cool. Let's take a break. That's as hard as it gets. That's it. That's it. Everything else you already know. Okay? I promise. Or kind of already know. All right, take a deep breath. Cleansing breath, right? We got past it. All right. Let's talk about some basic components for a change here. All right? And we talked about components such as resistors, capacitors, and inductors. There's some nomenclature you need to know, okay, to fix the radio on Gilligan's Island, right? So you need to know about nominal value, and very specifically nominal value means that's where they designed it to work, okay? And that could be temperature, humidity. There could be a lot of factors, okay? So the component specifically identifies its nominal value. Where was it designed to work, all right? Tolerance, we all know what tolerance is, right? So tolerance is how much can you exceed that without smoking something, okay? Normally it's plus or minus 5% on electronics, right? Temperature coefficient, on some components it will tell you how the component will degrade or improve in performance depending on temperature. Computers are especially sensitive to the temperature coefficient. And for the computer gurus in our class, they will validate that computer performance is the inverse of temperature. Who's our computer people here? Do we have any computer hotshots here? Nobody? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Well, yes, we have. Yeah. Who's our computer guru?
I manage IT operations, so yeah.
All right, cool. So will you validate that computer performance is the inverse of temperature?
Absolutely. Your processor gets hot and everything stops.
That's right. So in the old days, they used to have, I don't know if they still have them, maybe you could tell me, where they have all the servers and stuff, they always have the super duper air conditioner, and you have to wear like muckalucks and snowshoes to walk in there. Do they still do that?
Yeah, they design data centers with like hot and cold rows now. So the row on the front of the servers are normal temperature, but the one behind it is actually the one on the front's cold, Joe, and the one on the back is normal.
When you get into some of these crazy guys that are actually trying to overclock their computers, they will actually use cryogenics liquid nitrogen and stuff to actually cool the processors, just to eke out that little bit before they explode.
That's pretty cool. That's cool. I have some computer. I am a Microsoft certified engineer, by the way. I do have some computer experience, so I kind of already knew the answer to that, but I just wanted somebody else to validate it. I don't do a lot of computer server work and that kind of stuff anymore, but the principles are the same, whether it's computers, radios, any electronics where there's a lot of processing, Wheatstone processing going on, same kind of deal. So the cooler it is, the better it works normally, as a general rule of thumb, okay? But there is a limit, of course, all right? And then the power rating. So this is how much power you can put into something before you smoke it, all right? So pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. All right, surface mount technology, okay? And did we talk about that? I think we did. Did I show that to you in the tech class, technician's class? Did I show you my Baofeng that I took apart? Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I believe you did.
All right, so I'll do it one more time anyway. Let's see if I can find it. And while I'm looking for it. Anyway, the point is that electronics have miniaturized dramatically. What you remember seeing as resistors and inductors and that kind of stuff is about the size of half of a grain of rice. It's about the size of them now. Okay. I'll try to have some surface mount technology components for you to look at, okay? But they're minuscule. And normally the smaller they get, the tolerance they have, and the more temperature coefficient sensitive they are. That's why if you guys and ladies that have Baofengs, right, and you press the transmit button, right, and you hold the transmit button down for a minute or two, the LED, or the liquid crystal display on the Baofeng will disappear. That's not unusual for the Baofengs. Or if it's very cold out and you leave it in your car, the LCD will not work, okay? They don't have a big tolerance. Remember, these are super cheap radios, so their specifications are very poor. David says, is there anything you do not do? I do not. Okay, absolutely not. All right, cool. So all of these components we talk about, inductors, capacitors, transistors, integrated circuits, they're all super miniaturized now. And they're tiny, and you can't even solder them together with a regular soldering gun. You use rework stations that use hot air. Okay? All right, cool. Then we talked about some new components that we have. They're on your study sheet. I need you to know them, okay? And we talked about the field effect transistor, all right? And we talked about NPN and PNP. I am going to send you this evening 2 videos I want you to watch, and they describe PNP and NPN transistors and how they work. It really works very, very simply. It's not a big deal, but you should know a little bit more about how transistors actually work. All right? And if you take a gazillion, jagillion of these transistors and you put them under one roof, we call that an integrated circuit. Okay? So this is the normal resistor here. Okay? They look like this in the old days, and this is used to put these wires here through the circuit board. All right? And it was called through-the-hole soldering. So you'd put this printed circuit board would have 2 little holes. You bend this, you put them through the holes, you solder them. Not anymore, okay? So this resistor in surface mount technology is this size, okay? It's really cool, okay? And I think this is on a dime or something. They compare it. That's the size of it. I'll have some of them for you to look at. And if I sneeze while I'm holding it, I will never find it again. You'll never find it in my carpeting. Okay? All right, cool. Parasitic inductance. Okay? Now, you can have resistors, and this is a question on the test, by the way. Okay? This whole gazunka here. So you can have resistors made out of electrolytic elements, or you can have wire-wound resistors. They don't use them too much anymore. And the reason they don't is if you have two resistors that are wire round, so they have wire inside of them, okay, they start to act like inductors rather than resistors. And the magnetic field, whenever you wind wire, you create a magnetic field, they start to affect each other, okay? And that's known as parasitic inductance. That's why it's not used too much anymore, okay? All right, cool. These are different types of resistors, inductors, okay? The commonality that they have between themselves is they always have wire someplace. Maybe you don't always see the wire, but the wire is there, okay? So these are air core. There's nothing in the middle of them. You have variable. This little component up here slides in and out, okay? And magnetic core, toroidal inductors. That's what they look like, okay? And they talk about these guys here, laminated iron core, powdered irons. All right, I don't need you to worry about this stuff too much, okay? They do act well as power supplies. They work in the chokes or filters, okay? And that's really their main focus in life, all right? All right, cool. And then they talk about this. These magnetic fields start to affect each other and the electromagnetic force you have to account for. Don't worry about it too much, okay? Just know that if you take two pieces of wound wire and you put them pretty close to each other, how close? Pretty close. They start to act in a different manner. That's all I need you to know for right now, okay? If you want to go into this from a mathematical perspective, then I suggest you take the extra class. We talk about this quite a bit in the extra class, okay? All right, cool. So capacitors you know about. Don't touch them. Don't go near them. Tell your friends not to touch them. You know, if you've got some wise aleck kid comes in and wants to touch the capacitors in your power supply, let him. All right, if he's obnoxious, let him. He'll only do it once. Okay. Now, when we talk about capacitors, the question they love to ask, love it, is this guy here, okay? Ceramic capacitors. It's the same question you were asked in your technical. And why do we use ceramic? Because they're cheap. That's it. That's the only reason. Period. End of sentence. Cheap. That's it. Everything else is not so important, okay? All right, cool. So we should all know what this stuff is, right? So these are resistors. Here's a battery. Here's another resistor. And then they're going to, this is the introduction to the stuff we already know, okay? So this is the stuff that appears in your sheet. We already talked about this stuff, and we can handle this one reciprocal 1 over 1 over. And we're going to pick on somebody such as Judy Cox. Hiya, Judy.
Hi.
How are you?
Okay. I'm kind of nervous. My head's about to explode.
No. You're going to do great. So, Judy, so you're going to explain to us, because I forgot, okay? So I have a question. And let me switch to my pen here. That takes about 10 minutes here. Hold on. I have a question, right? So we're in a series circuit, right? We're in a series circuit. We have a series circuit. And I have 3 resistors. So there are 30 ohm, 10 ohm, and 50 ohm. How do I compute the total resistance here?
You add each, in a series, you add it together. So you add 30 plus 10 plus 50 to get 90.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with that? All right, cool. All right, so that was easy, so I'll let you off easy on that one, all right? So now, let's pick on Andy. Let's pick on Andy Eubanks. Hey, Andy.
Hello.
Hiya. How's your day?
All right. I'm sick, but I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You want me to pick on somebody else?
No, you can pick on me. I may not answer. We'll see.
All right. So the same resistors. right? So the only problem is I decided to change the circuit and make it a parallel circuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would the total resistance? Well, tell me how I would figure out the total resistance first. This is in a parallel circuit.
Yeah, I'm going back and looking at my notes because I don't remember.
Actually, just look to the right of what I'm writing.
Oh yeah,
Right,
there you go.
there. All right, there you go. That's why I planned it that way, right? So, how would I compute that?
1 over each of them, so
Yeah,
that would be.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, add them up.
That's as much as I'm going to pick on you because you sound sick. All right?
Thank you.
No problem. 1 over 10. Forget this. This doesn't exist, right? Plus 1 over 50. You sound like you have a cold. Please feel better. Frank Jameson. Frank,
Yes,
you're the one that got stuck. You're the one that got stuck with the hard part here. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Step by step, tell me what buttons I'm going to press on my calculator to figure this out.
Well, you're going to use that 1 over X button,
Okay?
but I can't quite remember what you did with it, to be honest.
Okay. How about David? Hey, David, how are you?
If you're reading me, I'm okay.
I'm reading you fine.
I've had to restart this GoToMeeting 3 times already.
David, this is the worst software I've ever seen. I totally feel for you. I'm so sorry.
I actually had a question earlier, but...
I'm sorry. I'll go back. Let me just finish this one, and then we'll go back to your question, okay?
Okay.
All right. So how am I going to figure this out? And just so everybody knows, David has my calculator, so I know it works. Okay. Go ahead, David. Now you're really on the hot seat.
I am. And actually, I figured out how to do this on my calculator last night.
Oh, okay. Well, use my calculator because everybody else has my calculator on there.
Okay. We are going to take the inverse sum of the reciprocals.
Right.
So we are going to add. We're going to add the inverse of 30 plus the
Right.
inverse.
So we're going to hit 30. Right.
Okay.
We hit 30. What's the next button we hit?
1 over x.
Everybody knows, everybody sees that 1 over x, right? So we got that, and we get 0.033333. Go ahead.
Right.
Then we're going to hit the plus button. I know
plus
that.
sign.
Right. Next one.
Then we're going to hit 50.
No, the next one is 10, right?
Oh, sorry. Well, it won't matter actually, but we'll do it.
I want to do it step by step so nobody gets lost.
Okay, so let me clear that entry. Okay, give me 1 second. I got to
No problem.
go back
Take your
here.
time.
So it's 30, 1 over x plus 10,
10.
1 over
then
x.
And we hit the 1 over x button,
We get 0.1
right? And then we hit what button next?
plus
We hit,
and 50,
50,
1 over x
1 over x, and we get 0.02. That's what I get.
equals.
Okay, equals, and we
then,
get we get 0.153, right?
repeating, and then hit 1 over x again.
Okay.
And we get 6.52.
Okay. Thank you so much, David. Everybody follow that? Everybody good? Okay. Super easy. Super easy. Couldn't be easier. And the only thing you have to remember is to hit that 1 over x button to convert it, right? As long as you do that, you're in like Flynn. The hard part, the hardest part of this is know when you have to do the reciprocals and when you don't. Remember that in a series circuit, the only ones you have to worry about is the capacitors, right? In a parallel circuit, the only ones you don't have to worry about is the capacitors. That's the way I remembered it anyway. So I said to myself, okay, in a series circuit, the only ones that are going to give me a hard time are capacitors, and in a parallel circuit, The only ones that are easy are the capacitors, right? All right. Any question on that? So resistors and inductors in a series, piece of cake. Add them together. In a parallel circuit, only the capacitor is easy. Everything else you have to hit that 1/X button.
And then you get into series parallel circuits, and you're really screwed.
Well, we don't want to go there for right now. I agree, but we don't want to go there right now. Okay.
Can I ask that?
Yeah,
Can
sure.
I ask that follow-up question that I was trying to get onto before?
Sure.
It's back on decibels,
Okay.
and that's page 4-3.
Okay.
Where does the reference voltage come from?
From a manual. From a manual or from a laboratory piece of equipment. I have never seen one. Well, I shouldn't say that. It comes from either a manual or if somebody with very specialized equipment tests and says, okay, this is what you're really putting out, but somebody gives you that value. It's a measured, it's a certified value, not just measured, but it's certified. It's either in the manual or some high-level technician way above my pay grade gave that to you.
So we're not likely to see that one.
Well, I mean, we have to go by something, right? Mm-hmm. So I normally go by the manual, and then after I stop laughing, I'll test it on my oscilloscope, for example, and some other.
Oh, I think we lost him.
Yep, we lost him again.
Mid-sentence.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Another way of reference is, let's say you measure it, you add a resistor, the old measurement is the reference, and then the new measurement would be the measurement. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
I want to know how any of this is going to refill my glass.
After the test.
Yeah, I used to know all of this stuff by heart in high school. That was 35 years ago.
Yeah, same with me. And it was a little longer than that.
I could do waves, I could do orbits, I could do all sorts of stuff on a piece of paper. It was no problem for me.
I remember cheating with resistors in parallel because I could never figure them out. So I used to figure out 2 at a time. And then,
well,
there you go.
Yeah. Anyway,
He's back.
So I'm back. Yes. Okay. So they're going to give you examples like this. Okay, and you should be able to figure this out, no problem. Easy breezy, no sweat. Okay. They all follow the same pattern. Okay. All right. Cool. Now let's talk about something which is a little bit more complicated. Not complicated. Just something different. It's not complicated. Transformers. And transformers do exactly what their name implies. They transform one thing to another, okay? And the way transformers work, and I have to switch to my pen again. Hold on. And let's see if that works. Hold on. All right, so the way they work, kind of, sort of, if you could get that. So what they'll do is we'll have a tube in here, let's say, for example, and then we'll take a winding, right? And we'll wind wire around it, right? And this is known as our primary winding. And then inside, we'll also wire inside of it, and that's called the secondary wiring. Very crude diagram, I apologize. So this is primary, and this is secondary winding. And the way transformers will work is they're measured by this formula down here. And, hold on. I gotta get this sucker done. Hold on. Oh my God, this is awful. All right. So they use this for the purposes of this manual. Okay. They use this formula. Okay. So these are the most commonly found transformers in the equipment that we're going to be working with. Okay. And here, NP refers to the number of turns in the primary winding, and the secondary winding is known as NS. Okay? So the voltage of primary winding, voltage of secondary winding, the number of turns in the secondary winding, the number of turns in the primary winding. And that's what gives us the change, what the transformer will change in voltage. Okay? And they give you a couple of examples here, and they say, okay, what's the voltage across a 500 secondary winding if 120 volts is applied across the 2250 turn primary winding? Okay? I want you to know this one. I want you to memorize the answer and forget about it. When the test comes up, just answer the question, 26.7. This will be on everybody's exam, okay? So know this one, okay? G5CO6. You can do the math, and people get their cages rattled when they do the math and blah, blah, blah. So what don't we know here? What we don't, and I'll go through it with you, but I'd much rather you just memorize the answer and answer the question.
So what ES is voltage shift?
Uh-huh. Oh, no, voltage so this is the secondary voltage. This is the voltage that's coming out. Not the voltage that went in. This is the voltage that comes out. This is the secondary voltage. All right? We have a primary voltage, the voltage we put into this transformer, and the voltage that we get out. That's the secondary voltage. Right? Does that make sense?
And what does NS and NP stand for?
NS, well, let's start with NP. NP is the primary winding. So that on that crummy diagram that I just draw, it's the first winding, okay,
the outer
that we do. And then the secondary one is the winding inside the winding. Very popular in toroidal inductors. Okay? If you have a chance to join me for a kit building, you'll see that we build our own toroidal inductors. My wife is an expert at it because I hate doing it, okay? And she starts with one piece of wire and she winds it around, and then she has to, when that's done, she wires another around another specific number of turns. Okay? The lower the band, the more turns you have to play with, okay? I'm sorry, the higher the band in meters, so 160 meters, you'll be winding for a week, okay? So anyway, so this is how you would compute this formula. So what we're looking for here, what they're asking you here is, what is the voltage across a 500 secondary, they tell you, 500 secondary winding, so that's here, okay, 500, okay? If 120 volts, that's this guy here, is applied across the 220 turn primary winding. So we have all of the information that we need. So what do we have? We have the primary is 2250. That's what it says here. We see the secondary, that's 500, all right? And we have the voltage, 120. And all we have to do is do all of this math, all right? Divide 5, always do the math first. So it's 500 divided by 2250 times 120, you end up with 26.7. Okay? It always uses this formula here. All right? Okay. Yes? No? Good? Okay. All right. Then we talk about these formulas, angular frequencies, that you do not need to know. Please don't worry about them. They don't belong in this manual. They belong in the extra manual. So don't let this rattle your cage. And they talk about capacitive reactance. All you really need to know about this is that when you first turn on a current and you have a capacitor, the capacitor looks like a dead short initially. Okay? And the reason is the capacitor is like a cup. All right? You have to think of a capacitor as a vessel that holds electrons. All right? So capacitor looks like this, a cup. And when you start throwing electrons into it, nothing comes out for a while. Why? Because the capacitor is starting to charge. So initially, the capacitor looks like a dead short. So on a complicated circuit where you have a lot of capacitors, if you start to measure the output voltage, what's coming out, you won't get any reading. Okay, it'll look like it's dead. That's all you need to know about this. It's no more or less than that. Is this absolutely correct? No, but it's going to have to do for our purposes. I don't want to, I'm trying not to stress you out in Chapter 4 here. Okay? All right, cool. So it follows these two diagrams because capacitors charge over time. Okay? And you'll see that the voltage initially, no matter how much voltage you put, depending on the capacitor, of course, it starts to read 0, and then you start to read this rise here. Let me switch to, this is so cumbersome, I can't begin to tell you. Okay. And then it doesn't work when I go to my diagram anyway. Look at that. Oh my. I have this little red thing, right? And I should be able to go to my document, and you can see it, but it doesn't work. Oh, my God. Anyway. So I'm sorry that you'll see that. So I'm interested in this line here. Okay? So initially the line, it starts at 0, and over time, that's this guy here, it starts to charge. Okay? And then the voltage starts to increase, okay? And then it levels off. Okay? The inverse of that is as the capacitor discharges. And this is some theoretical capacitor that starts to discharge over time. Not all capacitors follow this pattern. Supercapacitors in particular do not follow this pattern. Okay? If I were to draw real quick, and this is our, so I'm looking at this maximum current chart thing. Supercapacitors discharge like this. That's how they work. They keep their charge, and then all of a sudden, over a specific period of time, wherever that is, depending on the capacitor, then they start to drop voltage very quickly. But more efficient capacitors, the capacitors that are used certainly in power supplies, their discharge rate looks like this, actually. And then they drop off quickly. The point is, if you touch those capacitors at any one of these points, it will ruin your entire day. Okay? Please don't worry about these formulas. Not necessary, not on the test. All they want you to know, it's a long-winded way of saying, be careful because capacitors do not discharge quickly. That's all they're trying to tell you. Okay? Let me just switch back to my normal mode here. Okay. All right, cool. Are we okay? Everybody's okay? Karen, you okay? Did I rot
Yep.
Did I rot your brain yet?
Not yet.
All right, cool. So the stuff that we introduced in the first class, that's why I did it. You know, when we talked about those inverses, inverse reciprocals, because now they're just second nature to you. You know how to handle them, no problem. One less stress that we had to handle in Chapter 4. So that's the reason we do this. Okay? All right, cool. Then they talk about impedance here. And impedance for the definitions of this class is anything that opposes current in an AC circuit caused by any kind of resistance, whether it's a light bulb, a resistor, an antenna, no matter what, we know as impedance. Okay? And resonance we defined in the technical class as everything being at peace with each other. Okay? In this class, we're going to define it a little bit more accurately, and actually this definition is pretty good. So these three lines here are actually a pretty good definition of resonance. Okay? So I'm going to read it because it's not a bad definition. You know me in the manual. I'm not buddies with the manual. In its broadest definition, resonance is the condition in which there is a match between the frequency, that's important, the frequency at which a circuit or antenna naturally responds and the frequency of an applied signal. All right? So what we're looking for is that the impedance for a specific frequency matches. Everything is at peace. Everything works well. Okay? And the reason for that is we get the most efficient transmission when a circuit is resonant for our definitions, okay? And the way we do that is the old world-famous antenna tuner, right? Everybody remembers my antenna tuner, or do you guys want to see it again? Want to see it again?
Sure.
Okay. Sure, why not? All right, no problem. And I think I saw I think we have a guest who logged in. I'm expecting a guest tonight. I don't know if they're here. All right, anyway. So, here's my radio. Hold on. Let me find my radio. There's my radio. Let's see if I can. I have a lot of radios on my desk, so please forgive me. Okay? And then the thing underneath the radio, right here with all these wires sticking out of it, that's my tuner. Right? And let's see if I can get this. Let me see if I can get this guy more in focus. This guy. All right, hold on. Let's see if I can. Let's see. That's crummier. Hold on. All right. So there's my my radio. I'm going to switch to a different band here. All right. So it's hard to see on this radio at this angle, but if you look down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this tune button. Everybody see that? Right? And when I press this tune button, you're going to hear a lot of mumbo-jumbo going on inside of this tuner. And then all of a sudden, this light's going to go on and says it's tuning. And when it successfully creates a resonant circuit, this will light up, SWR, standing wave ratio. So I'm going to press the button. It's tuning. And when that light lights up, it means it's tuned. Since these are connected, it's impossible to see here, but there's a little button up here that says tune. That's how I can tell if this is in tune. If I switch to another frequency, all right, actually let me set it off and turn it back on again, because I'm on so many frequencies, everything's probably tuned. So right now this is out of tune, and again, I apologize. Let me see if I can get it to be a little, let's see if I can get this. All right, so up here, you can see it now. So here, it just says upper sideband, okay, and there's nothing here, right? So when I press this tune button, and I'm going to try to show you both at the same time, watch on the upper left-hand display of my radio. I'm going to press the tune button. See that thing that's flashing right here, this guy here? That's taking a while. Nope, and it tuned. So this says tune here, which means that I have a resonant circuit, okay? And this is frequency dependent. So every time I change frequencies, not so much for this because this one's been abused for years, okay? But sometimes when you tune a specific frequency, or you switch bands or whatever, it'll go out of tune, and then you have to retune it for that frequency. So why does that occur? Because I love my wife with all my heart. We've been married for 41 years. I've never had a fight that I won, and I want to keep it that way, all right? She doesn't like a gazillion antennas going all over the place. So I have one 80-meter antenna. I have a full-wave 80-meter antenna in my backyard that I very, very cleverly hit. But I don't always want to talk on 80 meters. Sometimes I want to talk on 20 meters or 17 meters or 30 meters. So how do I address that issue? I address that issue by using the antenna tuner. That's its function in life, okay? So what it does, it uses capacitors and inductors inside, and I will have one for you to look at next time. I will take one apart. And when you press the button, there's a bunch of little motors and stuff inside, and they change the value of the inductors and the capacitors, okay, using a whole variety of different things, and they give me a resonant circuit, okay? Those are known as LC. L stands for inductor. C stands for capacitor. And they're also known as tank circuits or logic circuits. Here's another type of tuner. Okay, this one's not as fancy, so this one is manual. Okay, and I would take whatever frequency I want, and then I would start playing with these dials. Okay, inductors and transmitter, you know, and all of that stuff. And then when these two needles hit the middle here, I'm good to go. Okay, this is the old days. So I don't use this at all anymore. When I use my QRP, I use my QRP setup. It's a small. I have a small Yaesu that I take with me every place. I have a little tiny tuner, battery operated, and I'll try to have that for you as well. And it just hangs on top of my radio. I press the button. The LC circuit or the tank circuit. Sometimes it's known as a PI, P-I network. Okay, another name for it. And what it does is it electronically changes the length of my antenna so that my circuit is resonant. Okay? And that's very important to do. And the reason that it's important to do is you don't want to, you want the circuit to be resonant, you'll transmit further, you'll hear better, everything will work better, and you are less likely to damage your radio. Okay? That's what that means. All right, cool. And then they talk about impedance transformation. Okay? All of this junk, none of this is on the exam. Okay? You can read about this if you like, okay, and how transformers change impedance and that kind of stuff, but not really required. Okay? All right, cool. Impedance matching, this is what they talk about. As I told you, sometimes they're known as pi networks. There's different types. There's a whole theoretical thing you can learn about if you want to go into the extra class. But most impedance...
Lost him again.
Yep. Okay, I'm back. Everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. All right, thank you for letting me know. All right, cool. So, are we good so far? We're good? Any problems? We're almost done here. Okay. Active components. All right, cool. So we have diodes. Everybody knows what a diode is, right? So electrons come in, but they don't go out. They won't back out. Actually, they come out, but they come out in one direction. They act as a gate. Think of it that way, okay? And transistors can, as you know, can either act as a switch or they can act as an amplifier. And there are various types of transistors. One is P-type and one is N-type. And it's important that you realize, I'm also going to send you, as I said, videos on this stuff so that, just to reinforce it, N-type N-type and P-type transistors are electronically neutral. So they don't have a positive charge, they don't have a negative charge, they don't care. Okay? What they do is they allow either electrons to pass through them or not pass through them. But the transistor itself is electronically neutral. It doesn't have any charge of any type. Okay? So that's it. If current flows when positive voltage is applied from the P to the N type, okay, from the positive to the negative, we call that forward biasing. Okay? When the opposite occurs, it is not forward biased. It's called reversed bias. Okay? Don't worry about it too much, not too much to get crazy about. Okay? All right, cool. Excuse me. Then they talk about this stuff. Semiconductor diode has several ratings, and this is what a diode would look like. And they're rated in a bunch of different ways. Okay, and they talk about how the ratings work. So this is this stuff. I've never seen this question asked on any exam. Okay, so don't worry about this. I'm trying to minimize the math as much as we can. Okay. Okay. All right. Then they talk about pin diodes. They're excellent for switching. These are different types of diodes, by the way, we're talking about. Pin diodes, Schottky diodes, much more popular, okay? These are amazing power supply and filter devices. Varactor diodes, and they look like capacitors, and they work like capacitors to a large extent with a variable coefficient. So what does that mean is they act like variable capacitors. They can fill at a certain level, they can discharge at a certain level, and the cool thing about them is they're software controlled. Okay? So they can act one way at one time and act another way at another time. Okay?
So why would it be? Why is it a diode and not a capacitor?
The reason is they don't hold as much energy as a regular capacitor. Okay, so they won't hold tons of energy. So you can touch a diode, and I don't think you're going to be in for a surprise. Okay, normally, and they're much easier to control from in a software environment or a firmware environment. So it's just easier to control, but they don't store tons of energy the way a regular capacitor does. All right. So if you need to store a little bit of power for a brief period of time, and you want it to act a certain way, you would use a varactor. If you need to store a bunch of energy for a longer period of time in a quick discharge, then you want a capacitor. Okay. Zener diodes, they're awesome devices, and they're most commonly used in voltage regulators, power supplies. Okay. Very, very cool stuff. Okay. And most commonly, diodes are used in low power requirements because of their gate ability. So, for example, my wife's favorite thing in life is you know those solar lights that light up your garden. Okay, they look like this. They have a hood on them, and then they have a stake, and then you put them into the ground, right? And the sun has a solar cell here, silicon solar cell. And it lights up, and then at night it looks pretty, you know, around the yard. My wife loves those. So what these really are is there's a solar cell, okay, and they're made out of silicone normally, okay. Then they go into a diode, and then they go to a battery. Can anybody tell me why we would need the battery? Not the battery, but why we would need this diode? Anybody figure that out?
Well, the energy needs to go into the battery, not back to the solar panel.
That's exactly correct. Because if we didn't have this diode here, what would happen is, instead of lighting this light bulb, man, I can't draw with a mouse to save my life. Anyway, instead of lighting this light bulb, all right, what would happen is, if this guy wasn't here, if we got rid of it, all this energy would go back up to the solar cell, okay, because the resistance is less on the solar cell than it is going to this. Remember that a lamp, even an LED, is really a short circuit. So the electrons say, I don't want to go there. I'd rather go there. That's the reason that we use those diodes. And even in these big, gigantic ones that they use on the side of the highway, out in California, they use that a lot. They use these gigantic solar-powered lights to light the roadway. They use diodes for that. Okay? All right, cool. Then they talk about bipolar and field effect transistors. You can read about them. Nothing too spectacular about them. Just kind of basic stuff. What I do want you to know here is that the PNP transistor, the little arrow goes in, okay? And on NPN transistors, the little arrow goes out, okay? And the only one where the outputs are at right angles to the plate, to the gate rather, is FET, field effect transistor, okay? and you can go into this a little bit more in more detail reading it. It's all pretty simple. All right. I want to get through Chapter 4 tonight, and if you get stuck with something, let me know. But you can read about this, and again, I'll send you 2 videos that go into this in a lot of detail. We're almost done, I promise, and we got through it. Okay. Vacuum tubes. Okay. The reason they want you to know about vacuum tubes is because they're kind of cool. They're kind of cool. We have any guitar players in the audience here? Anybody in the class guitar player? Electric guitar player? No? Okay. Well, guitar players look for tube amplifiers. Nothing is as good as tube amplifiers. They're nowhere near as efficient as semiconductor amplifiers or modern electronics, but tube amplifiers sound better. They just sound better. Okay? They sound warmer. They sound fuller. Vacuum tubes have definite advantages. They're still used in some amplifiers, and some of the pure ham guys use vacuum tubes. Okay, that's problematic because they have to heat up, and they're expensive now because not a lot of people make them. But we still want you to know a little bit about vacuum tubes. So the question you will be asked, there are 2 about vacuum tubes, are these 2. Okay. And they have at least, well, only one of them appears in each series of tests, and I don't know which series you'll get or which get, so you need to know these 2. Okay? So basically, the way a tube works is there's a heater. That's why tubes get hot. Okay? And that's what causes it to emit electrons. The cathode component inside is the source of electrons. The control grid controls how much electrons hit, how many electrons are going out. Okay. The screen grid adjusts capacitance inside the tube. Okay. And the suppressor grid prevents electrons from traveling all over the place, keeps them under control. The 2 components of a vacuum tube that you need to know are these 2 guys here. Okay? And you can read about them. They're pretty cool. Okay? Oh, we didn't talk about the plate. The thing that the electrons smash into is called the plate. And the different tubes are configured different ways to perform different functions. Okay? They're still kind of cool. Okay? Analog and integrated circuits. Basically, they're little computers, okay? And the way I want you to think about these guys, am I going too fast for anybody? Are we still good? Everybody's good?
Still doing good.
All right, cool. So what I want you to think about these guys here is I want you to think about light switches, right? That's how I want you to memorize this stuff. This will make more sense this way, okay? So, especially in my house, okay? So you walk up my up the stairs into my house, and I have a split-level ranch, right? And the first thing you see facing you as you walk up the steps is you'll see a panel with 2 switches, right? And those 2 switches were obviously wired by my next-door neighbor who's an electrician, but on the Monday following New Year's when he drank a lot, okay? And I love him, so I'm not going to say anything I wouldn't dare hurt his feelings, okay? So we have a light that is in our foyer, right? Chandelier, actually. Anyway, that's a chandelier. Chandelier, okay? So depending on how I press these buttons, these 2 switches, so this is on, right? And this is, well, let me do it this way. That's off, this is on. This is off, and this is on, okay? So depending on how I press these guys, that light either goes on or goes off. It works exactly this way.
So it's a 3-way switch.
I don't know what the hell it is. Okay?
He set it up as a 3-way, but he wired it wrong.
I have no idea. Okay? All I can tell you is it follows the AND gate rule. Okay? So when you think about, they have asked you questions about AND, think about my house. Okay? This light will only go on if I turn both of these switches on. Okay? That's this. If I turn either one of them off or I turn them both off, nothing happens. They both have to be on. Right? So in any combination, so these are the permeations, the possible combinations of this. I'm sorry. These are the possible combinations, right? And this is the result. So I want you to think about my house when they talk about AND gate, all right? So if the value is low, they call this low value, and you press button 2 and it's low, the result is low. So any combination of this, the first switch is low, you turn the second one on or high, it's still low, still doesn't work. Third one is you turn the first one on, you turn the second one off, you get nada, zippo, goose egg. It's only when you press all of these on, both of these on, does the stupid light go on. Okay?
So that's not a three-way, then he has them wired in series.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no, that sounds logical to me, but it gets better. But it gets better, okay? It gets better. Downstairs, okay, I have the same configuration, okay, and that powers the lights to my basement. My basement is actually at ground level, okay, so I really don't have a basement, okay, and it's the exact opposite of this, okay. In order for me to turn everything off, and this is true, by the way, you're more than welcome to come to my house, and I know David lives not too far from me. He's coming over to check it out. He'll see, okay? In my basement, the same switches, installed the same day, by the way, a little bit later in the afternoon, I guess when the hangover was really starting to cook his brain. Anyway, and it works this way, okay? In order for the stupid light to go off, I have to have both of these on. This is a perfect example of a NAND gate, okay? So no matter what I do, if they're both off, the lights stay on. If I turn the right one on and I turn the left one off, the light still goes on. If I turn the left one on and the right one off, the lights are still on. The lights will only go off if I turn them both on. Beats me. No clue, okay? The point that I'm trying to make here is this is pretty simple, okay? So for the value to be high, remember they refer to one as being high, the first switch and the second switch have to be high. In an N-AND gate, a NAND gate, both switches have to be on to get a 0 result. Okay? We good? All right. Now, I don't have lights like this. I only have lights like the first two. This is an OR gate. Okay? So these are logic circuits. These are little circuits inside that respond to high voltage, no voltage, or low power, high power, depending on what they do. Okay? In the OR gate, okay, all this means is one or the other has to be high in order to get a high result. Okay? So remember, OR means either or will give you a high result. Okay? And a NOR gate only works when both switches will only be high when both switches are off. These are the 4 I need you to know. However you want to remember them, these are the ones I need you to know. Okay? And these are different logic circuits that respond to either complete the circuit, not complete the circuit, send power to capacitor or resistor, or whatever it's going to do. This is the logic circuits inside of them. Okay? All right. We're just going to do a couple more pages, and I promise we'll be out of here. Okay. And they talk about digital logic basics, and they all work on these 4 principles: AND, OR, NAND, NOR. Okay? That's only 4 types of logical circuits that there are. We'll talk about these clock circuits at a different time. These do exist, and these are basically timers, and don't worry about them too much. Okay. All right. Integrated circuits. I told you that if we take if we take a gazillion transistors and we put them under one roof in a tiny little package, those are called integrated circuits. Big word I need you to know. This MMIC. Monolithic microwave integrated circuits. Okay? They are how your radios work, modern radios. Okay? Just know what it stands for. All right? And what they are, if you own a Baofeng, you have a monolithic microwave integrated circuit in there. It takes a whole bunch of integrated circuits and puts them all under one chip. So each integrated circuit is a gazillion transistors. You take a bunch of those and you put them in one package. You get a monolithic microwave integrated circuit. Okay? That's basically it. Any type of wireless device, your cell phone, your keyboard, Bluetooth, they all work on this principle. Amazing feat of engineering. Okay? And these little microprocessors, we call them microprocessors because they're so small. Sometimes called a microprocessor chip. Okay? All right, cool. If you guys, I know everybody has a computer. These are all different types of stuff that goes in your computer. The easiest way to remember it is just think about your computer. The two types of memory that they want you to know about, okay, is static RAM. RAM is random access memory. Works great. It's very fast. The problem is if you lose power, everything you just did goes down the toilet. That's happened to everybody here. I know it has, okay? You're in the middle of typing a Word document. You just wrote the great American novel. The power goes out, or your computer freezes, especially if you have Windows 8.1, okay? And you have to reboot your computer. That information is lost, okay? So as soon as you lose power, there's any loss of power, random access memory is lost, okay? Programmable PROM or ROM memory, read-only memory, and that's most common when you turn on your computer, for example. Okay, it knows that it's a Dell or it's a Macintosh or it's an HP or whatever it happens to be. That's written in firmware, so it is not volatile when it comes to power. Okay, those are the things I need you to know. All right, cool. And common interfaces, I'll have this for you on Tuesday. I'll show you what they look like. Everybody knows what USB looks like, right? And I'll bring some other connectors for you to look at. All right? All right, cool. And then they talk about interfaces, not used so much anymore, serial and parallel. I can go into the computer definition of both of these, but they're not used that much. Just real quickly, I promise to make it quick. Two types of major connectors on computers. This is serial, right? And then we have little data packets, right? And they go down the chain, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, right? Problem with this is if something happens to this guy, the whole chain. So this is like sheep falling off of a cliff. Okay? So one after the other, parallel, normally 8, sometimes more. There's 8 lanes, right? A great way to explain this is you're on a single lane road, right, with cars in front. First car stops, everybody stops, right? In a parallel environment, you have 8 lanes to choose from, and if something gets stopped here, the other data will flow. That's the difference between serial and parallel, kind of, sort of. Our IT expert will disagree with me slightly, but generally that's the long and the short of it. All right, cool. Don't stress over this stuff too much, okay? And then we're going to stop here because I'm tired and you guys probably rotted your brain. All right, so what we're going to do on Tuesday, next Tuesday, is we're going to finish up this chapter. We're almost done with it. We'll talk about rectifiers and et cetera, So if you could just practice the first half of Chapter 4 and then look at this practical circuits, rectifiers, don't let this stuff make you crazy, okay? You're not really too responsible for this stuff, okay? Just a couple of questions and I'll point them out to you. Just kind of get an idea for rectifiers do. And then we talk about, as David brought into play, we're going to talk about diodes and parallels and series, how they affect each other, kind of generally, all right? And power supply safety, switching power supplies, which we'll go through very quickly, and then we'll talk about batteries, and I think that's the end of this, okay? Which batteries to play with, which batteries you don't play with, and not too bad. And we'll talk about connectors. I'll promise to have 1 million connectors for you, and for you to see. And just this basic test equipment, that's the end. Is everybody familiar with multimeters and what they do and how they work?
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah? Anybody not have a problem? Judy says, thanks, Joe, you give me hope. All right. If you're not familiar with multimeters, shoot me an email. I have a great video on Multimeters 101. Every house should have one, all right? Oscilloscopes, if you're lucky, I'll whip out my oscilloscope, and we'll play with my antenna tuner. I'll hook, and that's the end of the chapter, okay? So not too bad. So just review one more time. Chapter 4, this is the hard one. Next week, on Tuesday, we'll finish Chapter 4. We'll hit Chapter 5 and 6, and on Thursday, 7 and 8, and we're done. The rest of this stuff is not hard at all. It's the stuff you already know, okay? Just a little bit more detail. All right? Any questions? No? Okay. No problem. I'm going to send everybody the video on the multimeter just as a refresher. Okay?
Thank
and
you.
then I'll have a multimeter here just in case you want me to go over something. All right, guys. Have a great one. Have a great week. Great weekend. I'll see you guys on Tuesday. You're welcome. All right.
Thank you,
Good night.
Joe.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. You're welcome.